Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a conversation with the Mutts. This is yet another dual simulcast between the Mutts American Crime and a conversation with the Mutts. Tonight, we are discussing the Italian mob, the differences between the Italian mob or mafia and the Irish mob. And I've found that there have been a number of them. I am your host, by the way, the Celtic Mutt.
And I am Mrs. Mutt.
And we have found quite a number of differences, I think. Wouldn't you say?
Well, I didn't so much look at differences. I wasn't able to really locate so much in the way of differences. I found more in the way of history and some interesting facts looking at the Italian.
I do have some of the differences as well as the similarities between the two. While both the Irish and Italian are organized crime groups, which emerged from similar backgrounds of poverty and discrimination, the Irish mob generally operates at a lower level of organization.
Yeah, I did come across that.
Yeah. And ambition compared to the Italian mafia.
I actually, as far as the organization, I came across something that basically said that there was a mobster, for lack of a better term, that looked up to the Romans, specifically Caesar, to the point that he was actually nicknamed Little Caesar. That was not meant as a compliment.
Did he make pizzas?
No. So he actually is the one that designed, shall we say, the hierarchy.
Okay.
And did so after the Romans.
I got you. Well, I was going to finish what I had here real quick. No problem. Where was I? The ambition. The Italian mafia often focuses on, the Irish mafia, excuse me, in comparison to the Italians, often focused on, or does focus on, street gangs and local rackets rather than large-scale hierarchical criminal enterprises. The reason that the Irish mob or mafia was not as large as the Italians is due to a lack of organization. The Irish mob was more a collection of street gangs, while the Italians were more organized and more focused on big business, as I was just stating a moment ago. The Irish and Italian mafias, while both involved in organized crime, have distinct characteristics and structural differences, history as well as histories. Here are just some of the differences: the origins and historical context. The Irish mafia primarily emerged in the United States during the 19th century and early 20th centuries, particularly in cities like Boston, go Southies, Chicago, and New York, and was largely comprised of immigrants and their descendants who often faced discrimination and social exclusion, and were frequently simply just tired of being marginalized and were looking to increase their recognition within the organization or within society. The Italians were organized in Italy, particularly Sicily. Now, you never call a Sicilian Irish. I mean, Italian. Yes. You don't call him Irish either.
No.
Because both would get offended then.
You might get whacked.
You might just get whacked. It was organized predominantly in Sicily and has roots dating back to the 19th century, whereas you just said it's dated all the way back to what, basically?
Possibly the Middle Ages. There are some that suggest that it go back that far.
Yeah.
With that interpretation, it says it possibly began as a secret organization dedicated to overthrowing the rule of various foreign conquerors of the island, such as the Saracens. I hope I'm pronouncing
the Saracens,
that right.
Yeah.
Normans, and even the Spaniards.
Now, you were talking about the different organizations. The Italians, the Italians are actually, they include several groups, such as the Costa Nostra, the Drangheta, I believe is how it's pronounced, and the Camorra, each with its own regional influences and characteristics.
Right, and they actually credit, from what I've read, the Camorra as the origins specifically for the American Mafia.
Ah, so it was the Camorra and not the La Cosa Nostra.
Well, but they call, from what I came across, they call the American Mafia refers to itself as La Cosa Nostra.
But it was more of the Camorra?
But it was more based on the Camorra, is what I came across.
I got you.
Now, but going back to the origins, they say that it owes its origins to, and drew its members from, the many small private armies, or mafia, or MAFIE.
Mafia, which is probably the root for mafia.
Right, exactly. And these were, again, small private armies that were hired by absentee landlords to protect their landed estates from bandits in the lawless conditions that prevailed over much of Sicily through the centuries. And this was during the 18th and 19th, during the 18th and 19th centuries, the energetic ruffians in these private armies,
energetic ruffians, I like that,
organized themselves and grew so powerful that they then turned against the landowners and became the sole law on many of the estates, actually extorting money from the landowners in return for protecting their crops. The mafia survived and actually outlasted Sicily's successive foreign governments because the latter were so deeply despotic that they alienated the island's inhabitants and actually made the moral code tolerable. And the code was based on Amerca. And when you hear Amerca, it's going to sound very familiar. The obligation never, under any circumstances, to apply for justice to the legal authorities, and never to assist in any way in the detection of crimes committed against oneself or others. The right to avenge was to incur reprisals, the right to avenge wrongs was reserved for the victims and their families, and to break the code of silence was to incur reprisals from the mafia.
You don't talk to the cops. You never talk to the cops.
Nope. And by about 1900, the various mafia families and groups of the families based in the villages of Western Sicily had joined together in a loose confederation and controlled most of the economic activities in their respective localities.
Now,
sounds a little
familiar. Yeah, it does sound a little familiar. I will. The Now, see the Irish. What would you say was the predominant crime that the Italians were
Well,
involved in?
That's my darling. Depends on when you're looking.
Okay.
1 second here.
See, I have it that they're currently within the 20th and 21st centuries engage in a wide range of criminal enterprises, including drug trafficking, human trafficking, strong influence in legitimate businesses, and can infiltrate various sectors of the economy.
Well, like I said, it does depend on when you're looking.
Right.
Prohibition opened a huge door.
I would imagine for both the Irish and the Italians.
Yeah. After once that went into effect, it just really, it was perfect. It was, for lack of a better way to put it, a perfect storm.
Well, it was easy money.
Yeah, it was. You figure it just, in a lot of ways, they're predicting the same sort of thing possibly happening if the government outlaws cigarettes.
Oh, well, cigarette smuggling is already a thing.
Yes, but they're saying it worse if they outlaw them here.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
I mean, right now, it's because they can get them cheaper from a smuggler.
Yeah.
If they're outlawed, that's going to be the only real way, unless you can get somewhere to smuggle them in yourself.
Well, tobacco it was and still is to some degree, are largely known for its tobacco crops.
Yes. But when alcohol was declared illegal, whether it was the manufacturer or the manufacturing, the transporting, or the sales, you had a huge demand, and you had a lot of law enforcement and judges that just kind of went, I don't see anything, with their palm out.
Right.
Because they didn't really feel it was truly illegal. And it was just an opportunity for them to, make a little, because they didn't really see it as illegal, and some just didn't see it as illegal and overlooked. I won't say everybody that, had their palm out.
Gotcha.
But once that was repealed, things shifted. They abandoned bootlegging and settled into things like gambling, labor racketeering, loan sharking. Since they couldn't do it with the alcohol, they shifted to narcotics.
Yeah.
And prostitution rings.
I know the Italians at one time had a no illicit or narcotics rule.
Right.
And that's changed after Prohibition.
Well, going back to even like we were talking about with La Franza heist.
Yeah.
Looking at specifically the group that Henry Hill was involved in, it's my understanding that Paul did not want them involved.
No, he didn't want them involved.
And that Henry and a few others got involved in that. And part of the reason that they were covering stuff up was because they didn't want that exposed to Henry or to Paul.
To Paul, because Paul had already nixed it.
Right.
Because that draws heat.
Right.
It was going to draw a lot of heat, and Paul knew that. Especially back then, drugs was a hands-off.
They did it. They actually grew, the Italians actually grew to be the largest and most powerful of the U.S. syndicated crime organization.
Mm-hmm.
And what it did is it actually reinvested the profits that accrued from the crime into legitimate businesses such as hotels, restaurants, and entertainment venues.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine that in addition, or in entertainment ventures, pardon me, I would imagine that in addition to those bringing in some money on their own, they also help to launder.
Yeah, Danny Green, which we'll get into him in a bit. He had the Irish Club in Cleveland, and that was its primary function. Was it provided him an excellent way to clean his dirty money, if you will.
Right. Now, this actually also says that investigations conducted by our government, our governmental agencies in the 50s and 60s revealed that the structure of our mafia was very similar to that of the Sicilian prototype.
Well, that makes sense.
Right. Mafia operations were conducted by some 24 groups or families throughout the country in the 50s, or from the 50s, pardon me. In most cities where syndicated crime operated, there was one family, but in New York, as we know, as we discussed, there were five, which were the Gambino, Genovese, Lucchese, or
the Lucchese.
Yeah, Colombo, and Bonanno.
The Bonanos.
The heads of the most powerful families made up a commission, whose main function was judicial. At the head of each family was a boss or don, whose authority could be challenged only by the commission. So if they made if the boss or don made a decision, the only person or only way it could be challenged was the commission said,
Yeah, they had the don, then they had the underboss, then they had lieutenants and cap, and
right. And I was going to go
capo.
Into that.
Yeah.
Each don had an underboss who functioned as a vice president or deputy director,
mm-hmm.
and a consigliere, who was or counselor, who had considerable power and influence. Below the underboss were caporgem,
the capos,
which those were basically lieutenants.
Yes.
They acted as buffers between the lower echelon and the don himself, protecting him from too direct association with the workers or with the organization's illicit operations. The lieutenants supervised squads of soldiers who often had charge of one of the family's legal operations, such as vending machines, food products companies, or restaurants, or illegal operations involving prostitution, gambling, or narcotics. Now, by the late 20th century, the mafia's role in U.S. organized crime seemed to be diminished. This was because of convictions of top officials, defections by members who became government witnesses, and murderous internal disputes thinned by the ranks.
Yeah, there were a few of those.
Yeah. In addition, the gradual breakup of insulated Italian Sicilian communities and their assimilation into the larger American society. So all of that effectively reduced. Thank you for spilling that onto my shoulder, little girl. Reduced the traditional breeding ground for the prospective mafiosi.
Well, I still had
sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I still had some of like the cultural differences in the ethos. Would you like me to go through those?
By all means.
Like with the Italian mafia, they often emphasize a sense of community and loyalty among members, predominantly enforced by your capos and your soldiers and your yes. They are often sometimes romanticized in media, linking it to themes of family and heritage. Now, that's actually the Irish. I'm sorry. That was the Irish. Whereas the Italians, I had it reversed. I'm
Wait a
sorry.
minute.
What?
Go on.
What?
That's sounding like you had it right.
It was that the Irish mafia often emphasizes a sense of community and loyalty among members. They are sometimes romanticized in media, linking it to themes of family and heritage. That is very much an Irish thing. Heritage and family are huge with the Irish. With the Italian mafia, it has a strong cultural identity tied to its Italian roots, often featuring codes of honor and family loyalty. Both have a strong family loyalty tie. The Italian mafia is often portrayed in media as having a more glamorous or sophisticated image compared to the Irish. Look at Boondock Saints.
Yeah,
if we're going to speak, if we're going to go cultural for a minute, look at the Boondock Saints. You had two Irish brothers who.
I actually haven't watched that.
You haven't seen that?
No.
Oh, well then I won't give any spoilers away. But it is it has very strong family ties. The Black Dahlia is another one. Or the Donnellys, the Black Donnellys.
I was gonna say
the Black
Dahlia. No,
the Black Donnellys. I'm sorry, that was on me. The Black Donnellys, which was about the Donnelly family, which
I have not.
Are out of Boston. Somewhat historical. You'd have to catch the movie, but it definitely had some Hollywood glamorization done to it. Now, the Irish Mafia, historically, has been less visible compared to its Italian counterparts, leading to a perception of being less organized. However, it has had significant influence in certain regions, like parts of Philadelphia, parts of New York, Cleveland, Chicago, and of course, South Boston. The Italian Mafia, more notorious and widely recognized due to the high-profile cases, movies, and books that depict its activities, law enforcement agencies around the world have dedicated significant resources to combating Italian organized crime. I think they've put a target on their back. Now, geographic influence is another big thing. The Italians primarily are active in the United States, specifically in cities with large Irish populations, like I was just discussing.
Mm-hmm.
The Italians operate globally with significant influence, not only in Italy, but also the United States, Canada, Australia. I can't imagine an Irish mafia in Australia. I wish Dan were here. He's in New Zealand, but that's close enough to Australia that he would probably say that they had some organization down there as well, and other countries.
I don't know if Frank's still in here or not. Hello, if you are.
In conclusion, while both the Irish and Italian mafias are involved in organized crime, the differences in structure, history, and activities and cultural identity highlight the diverse nature of organized crime in different communities. Now, I know that the big thing in the 70s was the Irish Italian Mafia War, which was predominantly over the Javits Center that the one of the five families wanted control of, but the Irish mob, because of their ties to the unions, was fighting.
Right, but that is not at all the first time.
Oh no, it wasn't the first time, but that was in modern times. It was the most recent. Unless you found something, you found something more recent than the 1970s.
Right after that.
Okay.
So let me back up, and we'll go. If you don't mind, we can start further back and work our way forward.
Yeah. Well, let me know when we get to the Irish mob war.
I will definitely do that.
Yeah.
Well, this is the Irish mob versus the Italian mafia.
Oh, this is
all between the two of them.
Well. Solely between the two of them?
Yes.
Okay, well, I focus specifically on the one in the 70s.
Right, and we'll move from 1910 to 19, and the first event I have is 1910 to 1925 between the Irish White Hand and the Sicilian Black Hand, and then we'll move forward.
Ah, yes, the White Hand, Black Hand.
This is New York City waterfront. This is the first big mob war to break out between them. And again, this took place in 1910 to 1925.
So 15
the
years.
Irish mobsters were under the lead of Vinnie Meehan. They had early control of the New York waterfront. They had severe hatred for the influx of the young Italians that were starting to flood the country. They were going to defend their territory until the death. And sure enough, the Italians were quickly moving into the racket.
Well, you got to figure they'd been here. The Irish had been here since the potato blight of 1845.
Right, but that doesn't mean the Italians hadn't been here before that period.
But that was, they had it. You're right. I understand that, but
it's just that this is when they saw the big influx of them coming into New York. The Italian mob, back at this time, were often referred to as the Black Hand Gang. So in response, Meehan and the Irish crew became the White Hand Gang. Things got violent quickly between the two groups, and Meehan was murdered in 1920. He was replaced by the notorious Wild Bill Lovett, who had wars going with the Italians and even against fellow Irish gangs.
Street gang stuff.
Yeah. Wild Bill only lasted until October of 23, when he was beaten and shot to death. The killings of both Lovett and Meehan went unsolved. Frankie Yale was suspected in both cases, but police also pointed to the possibility of fellow Irish gangsters being involved. The White Hand gang was hurt, but they weren't ready to give up. So they rallied behind their ambitious and ruthless new leader, Richard Pegleg Lonergan. Pegleg immediately declared war against the Italians. He was up against the likes of Yale, which I have more information on Yale and with another article I have. Joe Adonis, Albert Anastasia, Vincent Mangiano, and dozens of other dangerous killers. Lonergan was up to the challenge and upped the ante by muscling in on more waterfront territory. He was brash and daring and downright foolish, but he felt strongly that he could take on and defeat the massive force of the Italians. It came down to a bloody end for the White Hands on the day after Christmas of 1925. Pegleg and 5 of his lieutenants. What?
Basically 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pegleg and 5 of his lieutenants showed up on Joe Adonis's social club, or at Joe Adonis's social club, causing trouble. They were ambushed, and Pegleg and 2 others died. The other members were shaken and refused to cooperate with authorities. They did not regroup, however, and the White Hand Gang were soon extinct. The next was right on its heels. This is the New England Mafia and the Guston Gang. Prohibition in Boston. During the first decade of bootlegging, the Irish mob controlled the profits in Boston. So they had the upper hand in Boston at this point. The premier gang was known as the Guston Gang, and their leader was Frank Wallace. They were based in South Boston.
Selby.
An area which has always been predominated by the Irish mob. The Gustons were a strong unit because of their ruthlessness and their vast influence with local politicians and law enforcement. Wallace and his brother Steve created the group in the 1910s. They were involved in gambling, loan sharking, and robberies back in those days. Prohibition was fantastic for the brothers as they found their earnings skyrocketing. Steve Wallace was their chief enforcer, an ex-boxer with a streak for savagery. Jim Wallace, another brother, also played a role. No one else in South Boston dared challenge the notorious Wallace brothers. In the meantime, in New York, the Italians had swiftly and forcefully taken over the waterfront and bootlegging rackets from the Irish. So they had their eyes on taking over the entire country and decided Boston was the next logical step. A couple of young Italian mobsters named Philip Bucola and Joe Lombardo would be the ones selected to take on the powerful.
Was Joe any relation to Frank?
It doesn't say.
Oh.
Frank
Lombardo. The Lombardo. Oh, that's Lombardi. Never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind. Bad joke.
They began building their base in Boston's North End, and that's where the rivalry started. What gave the Italians their confidence was their backing from the New York 5 families. They began moving in on the Guston Gang's territory and killing their members in the mid-1920s. Bucola became the first boss of what would later become known as the Patriarca, I hope, maybe, family, or the Office.
The Office. Okay. I have heard of the Office.
Yeah. The Wallace brothers upped the stakes of the rivalry when they started hijacking the liquor trucks of Lombardo and Bucola. The Italians reached out saying that they wanted a meeting to set up a truce. Yeah, they set up a trap and ambushed Frank Wallace and his lieutenant Bernard Walsh, killing them both. The move allowed the Italians to gain prominence in New England. Remnants of the Guston Gang carried on, and the Irish-Italian feud continued. They would also work together at various times when corroboration was needed. This brings us to Mickey Spillane and the Five Families.
Mickey
Battle for the
Spillane.
Javits Convention Center. There you go, my love. This is your part.
In the Irish Italian mob war of the 70s, the Irish mob saw an increased threat from the Italian mafia as the Genovese crime family sought control over the soon-to-be built Jacob K. Javits Convention Center. While there isn't a single defined start date for this version of the Irish-Italian mob war of the 1970s, tensions escalated and violence increased throughout the decade, with a notable period of bombings in Cleveland, and in 1976, Danny Green's death due to a car bomb. Now, the Irish-Italian mob war primarily took place in Cleveland, Ohio, and was also seen to some degree in New York City, specifically in Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan, and some in Boston. In the 1970s, the primary Irish crime figure in Cleveland was the aforementioned Danny Green, who led a group known as the Celtic Club. That was also the name of his bar, which engaged in a violent gang war with the Cleveland crime family of the Italians, leading to Cleveland being dubbed Bomb City, USA. How did the war end? The Italian-Irish mob war of the 1970s, primarily focused on Cleveland, ended with the assassination of the Irish mobster Danny Green by a car bomb, which I mentioned a moment ago, in 1977, which was orchestrated by a hitman by the name of Ray Ferretto, which led to the weakening of the Cleveland crime family. Now, due to the troubles in Northern Ireland between the Irish paramilitary groups and the British security forces, the death toll was actually relatively low. And that was what I had for that. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was. That was pretty much where I. That was pretty much what I had been able to find up to that point. What were you going to say?
I have kind of a different story.
Okay, well, what do you have?
I have Mickey Spillane was the boss of the Irish mob in the west side of Manhattan.
Well, that was the Manhattan side. I
Right.
focused predominantly on Cleveland.
Okay. Well, Mickey had been in control.
The Javits Center is in
Right.
is in New York, so that makes sense.
This is dealing with everything on the New York end.
Right.
Mickey was the boss of the Irish mob in the west side of Manhattan for nearly 2 decades. So he controlled a crew of 25 to 30 loosely affiliated guys in the neighborhood known as Hell's Kitchen. For most of his reign, he was able to coexist with the Italians, and they basically allowed him to operate freely on his turf. He did poke the bear on many occasions. He sometimes kidnapped mafia members and held them for ransom.
Sometimes.
The Italians sometimes used the West Siders for jobs, so they considered these kidnappings
Acceptable
losses? Just the cost of doing business.
Acceptable losses. Yeah.
Being that he never killed any of the hostages, okay. In the late 1970s, the construction of the new Jacob Javits Convention Center on the west side, that just changed everything. The project was huge, and it was square in Spillane territory. Mickey made the mistake of expecting the mafia to respect that. He offered them a position as junior partners.
In New York, he's going to allow the five families to be
Yeah.
junior partners. Okay.
The Irishman with 25 to 30 loosely affiliated guys is going to offer the five families a position as a junior partner. Yeah.
Spillane was known to have.
He's got balls.
Well, yeah.
He greatly overestimated his power by making such an offer. His gang had 24 guys, while the Italians numbered in the hundreds. What came next was an absolute wipeout. In the summer of 76, Spillane's top two enforcers, Eddie the Butcher Comiskey and Tom Devaney, were killed by Mafia hired gun Joe Mad Dog Sullivan. A few months later, Spillane loyalist Tom the Geek Capados was killed. Spillane saw all of this and smartly moved his family out of Manhattan to Queens, where he was hiding out. On the night of May 13th, 1977, someone rang the Spillane doorbell. Mickey said goodnight to his son and went downstairs. Somewhere I saw this part in a movie, I think.
No, it was a documentary that we watched on the... they talked about it anyway. Okay. Mickey Spillane Jr. did.
Okay. I said goodnight to his son and went downstairs, where he was shot to death by someone sitting in a car.
Yep.
The Mafia was not about to let Spillane walk away. It was none other than Gambino hitman Roy DeMeo that killed Spillane that night. The story of the West Side Irish was not over, though. It was just forming up. Over the years, Spillane's story has echoed that of Angelo the Gentle Don Bruno in Philadelphia. They were both bosses that preferred to use violence as a last resort, preferring the art of negotiations. Both would be replaced by a polar opposite. Jimmy Coonan in Hell's Kitchen and Little Nicky Scarfo in Philadelphia.
Nicky Scarfo.
These were two of the most violent men in the history of the American Mafia.
The reason I said Nicky Scarfo, I believe the movie Scarface is based around Scarfo.
Okay.
Has nothing to do with the name. I believe that's the case. I wish I'd had more time to double check that, but I believe that was who the movie was based on.
That took us to 77. Immediately from there, we go to the Westies and Gambinos make a deal. The meeting at Tommaso's, which runs from 77 to 87.
So for 10 years. Okay.
Yeah. So we go Jimmy Coonan as a young, ambitious gangster in the 70s who had set out to replace his rival, Mickey Spillane. Spillane had once smacked his father around and extorted his accounting business when Jimmy was a kid. After Spillane left town, Coonan took over the neighborhood and the group became known as Westies. He teamed up with the ultra-violent Gambino soldier, Roy DeMeo. Coonan was reckless, though. He killed a major Italian loan shark named Ruby Stein, maybe the biggest loan shark in New York. After luring Stein to his bar, Coonan and his buddies cut up Stein's body and dumped it into the Hudson River. Stein's torso, however, washed ashore, and Conan. No, wait a minute. In one place it's spelled Coonan, in another place it's spelled Conan. And company were the prime suspects. He and his top gun, Mickey Featherstone, were called to a meeting by Gambino boss Paul Castellano.
Hold on one second. Steel and Tree. I would have said hello earlier, but I was actually on the backside. I was trying to take care of some stuff, and did not see the chat. So I apologize to anyone who said hello earlier and did not get a hello back from me. I was not ignoring anyone. I was just on the backside taking care of some technical stuff that was going on. So I do apologize for not saying hello to everyone sooner. Go ahead, honey. I'm sorry.
I do get to your Danny Green in a minute.
Okay.
I'm wondering, I'm thinking, wasn't Polly supposed to be Paul Castellano?
Yes.
And wasn't Jimmy Burke supposed to be Jimmy Coonan?
I believe so, yes. I believe so.
Okay.
As I recall.
I'm thinking so.
Yep. I'd have to go back and listen to the LaPonce heist again.
Or
I know we covered it.
Our notes and such.
Yeah.
Anyway. So again, Stein's torso washed ashore, and Coonan and company were the prime suspects. He and his top guy, Mickey Featherstone, were called to a meeting by Gambino boss Paul Castellano at Tommaso's in Brooklyn, a Gambino hangout. They feared they'd be killed, but somehow DeMeo was able to convince Castellano that the Westies were worth more to them alive than dead. DeMeo advised Coonan to just simply deny the murder. That's what Jimmy did, and by the time they walked out of the meeting at Tommaso's, he had become an official associate of the Gambino family. The deal gave the Gambinos a cut of Westie's action and gave the Westies affiliation. So that would explain why Tommy or Jimmy was utilized to do LaPonce for the Castellano family.
Castellanos, yep. Hold on. Steel and Tree, you asked about the case that you told me about. You did say it was a rabbit hole. I'm about knee deep into that rabbit hole, but I am looking into it. I want to do it I want to do my due diligence before I even cover that story. There is a lot. You weren't lying when you said there was a lot to unpack there. So that story is forthcoming. It's just going to be a couple of weeks from now. But yes, I am looking into it.
Or rather, not the Castellano family, but Joe Castellano for the Gambino family. For Jimmy, the meeting went better than anything he could have expected. DeMeo realized a dream and became a made man as a result of the alliance. The Westies, teaming up with the feared DeMeo crew, made for an alliance very similar to Murder, Inc., the famous hit squad of the 30s and 40s. No mob family in the country would want to go against these kinds of killers. Coonan's fellow Westies were much less pleased with this turn of events. They felt that Jimmy had sold out the neighborhood. This led to the demise of the crew, as Featherstone and a few others actually cooperated with the FBI against Coonan and the Gambinos. They testified about how Coonan cut off the head of Stein and linked him to dozens of other murders, effectively killing the Westies for good.
So literally cutting the head off.
Right. Now that again was 77 to 87. If we back up a bit, This is probably your part,
Okay.
maybe, or may tie into your part, because this is Danny Green versus the Cleveland family.
Yeah.
New York,
that ties
late,
into, yes, that
New York
ties
City,
in.
late 60s to 73.
Yeah, that ties in.
Okay, then I won't.
If you have information on it, I didn't.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and the Irish mobster who the mafia had the most fear for was Cleveland's gangster Danny Green, who battled them tooth and nail during the 60s and 70s. He was very influential as a union organizer. He had control of extortion on the waterfronts. Businesses would cooperate or face labor shutdowns or supply blockages. Green was actually affiliated with the local Italian mafia for a time and did some work for them. His closest associate, John Nardi, was a one-time member of the Cleveland family, but decided to team up with Green. A battle for supremacy ensued. By the mid-70s, dozens of car bombs were going off, and Cleveland was known as Bomb City, USA, like you were saying. For whatever reason, car bombing was the far and away number one weapon used in this particular war.
Sounds Irish to me.
Between 75 and 77, at least 35 of them were set off in and around Cleveland.
There's a reason there's a drink called an Irish car bomb.
Yeah. Green and Nardi were fighting against the new boss, James LeCowley, and killed a number of his men. By 76, it looked like, with the help of Green, Nardi might be able to seize the entire family.
Wow.
In May of 77, Nardi was blown up, losing both of his legs. His last words before dying minutes later was that it, quote, didn't hurt. The Cleveland family...
He was probably in shock.
Probably. The Cleveland family tried to kill Green at least 10 times and failed during this time.
When you say the Cleveland family, you know I get the mental image of the Clevelands.
Yeah, Cleveland Brown and his family from Family Guy.
Yes, I get
and the
that.
Cleveland Show. Yes,
the Cleveland Show. I keep getting
Once
that.
you said
image.
that, I suddenly saw Cleveland's face.
Yeah,
but that is his first name, not last name.
Yeah, I know, but just that face popped into my head. Just a side note. Sorry, folks.
So again, they failed 10 attempts and failed. Then they decided to enlist some outside help. Seasoned hitman Ray Ferrito. He took a few more. He took Ferrito. A more. What?
Frito, yeah.
Ferrito,
yes.
Took a more cautious and surgical approach. They put a bug on Green's phone and waited for the right moment. On October 6th of 77, Green went to a dentist appointment, and his enemies knew he was there. Led by Ray Ferrito, they parked an explosive-rigged car next to Green and waited for Green to come out. When he did, they detonated the bomb and killed him on the spot.
Damn.
Okay, might get a little pieces of
Wait. Let me give a trigger warning here.
Yeah.
This next part could get a little graphic, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're sensitive to that, we're going to give you just a few seconds to either leave or mute or whatever you need to do. I'm going to give you a countdown from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 before we continue. Go ahead.
Pieces of Green's body were scattered around the scene. Green had waged a hell of a war, but now it was all over.
pieces of green. So instead of it's raining men, it was raining green.
Yeah.
Damn. But the bodies hit the floor.
What pieces of body?
Hit the floor, yes.
And the windshield. And the
yeah.
Sorry.
It not funny at all, but we were talking about those two songs earlier, so that's where the reference comes in.
I'm sorry. He had been playing
Let the
the
bodies
song,
let the bodies hit the floor.
and I had seen a meme that had said it's all in perspective.
Yep.
One man's let the body hit the floor, or one person's let the body hit the floor, is another person's it's raining men.
Yeah. So we were having that discussion on perspective, and that's where that came from. So anyway.
So next is Winter Hill versus Patriarca.
The
Family.
Winter Hill Gang. That would be Whitey Bulger, I believe.
So this is New England mob, and this is 1960s to 1980s.
That's Whitey Bulger.
This was one where the Irish truly got over on the Italians, but not without some serious outside help.
Yeah.
The mainly Irish crew known as the Winter Hill Gang was created in the 50s, a couple of decades after the Guston Gang disbanded. The Italians had been in charge in the years since, but the Winter Hill crew were about to push the Irish back to the top of the organized crime in Boston. The office is based in Providence, Rhode Island, and was run by the longtime boss, Raymond Patriarca Sr. They had a working relationship with the Winter Hill Gang, often using them for jobs. Patriarca also got a cut of what the Winter Hill members were making for many years. In turn, Winter Hill was basically able to expand throughout Boston, mostly unchallenged.
So they were paying tribute.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why they were able to
when
expand.
Whitey Bulger and Stephen Fleming took over Winter Hill in the 70s, they continued the association. What the office didn't know was that Whitey and Fleming were FBI informants. The FBI wanted the Italians and were unconcerned about the Irish mob. A dirty deal was struck between Bulger and the FBI agent, who was once just a young neighborhood kid that Whitey protected.
Yeah. We had that talk, remember? We talked about that?
Yeah, I think we were watching the video.
Yeah.
On, what was it, Prime? That was, I can't remember the name of the show, but they looked at several different,
Yeah, he basically was a dirty FBI agent and was working with Whitey.
Right, I think that's Angiulo.
Yeah.
No, that's one of the, Anyway, the agent's name is John Connolly.
That's right.
He looked the other way as Bulger and Fleming bludgeoned their way around New England. The Angiulo brothers were running the office at the time, and they soon felt the heat. Because of the info provided to Connolly, the Boston FBI were able to place bugs in one of Angiulo's hangouts and catch boss Jerry Angiulo with a racketeering charge. Is this the one where they put the bug above the place in the old woman's apartment?
I don't remember, to be honest.
Angiulo went to prison and was out of the picture. The informant kept feeding Connolly and slowly tore apart the entire hierarchy of the office. With the protection of the FBI, Bulger was able to become the mob king of New England and the most powerful Irish mob boss in the country. The Irish mob usually got the worst of it when they collided with the Italian mafia, but not so much so in Boston. This wasn't the first time a Winter Hill member used the FBI to get over on the office. Years earlier, Winter Hill hitman Joe the Animal Barboza testified against Patriarca and several other Italians. He put many of them away for life. This was another burn for the Boston FBI because years later it was revealed that Barboza had lied many times on the stand. Hi. I'm sorry, I have a kitty in front of me. He had lied many times on the stand, convicting other men in murders he had committed. Then we have Jimmy from Queens versus Carlo Gambino.
Ooh.
The kidnapping of Manny Gambino. This was in 72 and to 73. Do you want me to continue with?
By all means, yeah, go for it.
Jimmy McBratney led a crew of Irish gangsters who were involved in a rather bold and dangerous racket. They'd kidnap high-level mafia members and hold them for ransom. It actually worked many times, and they were able to make a couple $100,000. They had an inside source with the Italians who gave them leads and took a percentage. To a certain extent, the mafia bosses were slow to react when McBratney's crew and other Irish mobsters like Mickey Spillane were doing that. Pardon me. They were slow to react when McBratney's crew and others were doing the same. They paid the ransom and often just brushed it off as the cost of doing business. Jimmy and his team had always safely delivered the mobster back after payment was made, but that was about to go out the window. McBratney had someone inside the mafia who gave them leads for a cut. They called McBratney Jimmy from Queens. The group decided to go for big fish, kidnapping Lucchese family soldier Frank Manzo. The Lucchese's paid $150,000, but now they were actively looking for revenge. McBratney had something even bigger in mind: the Gambino family. In May of 72, McBratney and his thugs kidnapped Manny Gambino, nephew of the boss of bosses, Carlo Gambino.
That was Carlo's.
They grabbed him at gunpoint in front of his home and threw him into the back seat of a car. Carlo then paid a huge ransom to get Manny back, but somehow this time, Manny was killed. It's likely that Manny was able to see and recognize his kidnappers, leading to his death. One of McBratney's Italian partners soon spilled the beans on the arrangement. Word was out among all 5 families that Jimmy from Queens and his whole crew must die.
Damn.
Per Carlos order. They looked for a year with no success. The death of Manny was the only time that Carlo ever expressed rage in front of his criminal underlings. It was a miracle that McBratney would live for almost another year. The hit was assigned to the ultra well-connected young associate, John Gotti, also from Queens, like McBratney. Gotti scoured his Irish connections and found out that McBratney liked to hang out at a pub on Staten Island. When they found him there on May 22nd of 73, there was a struggle, and Jimmy from Queens was, what's your favorite word?
Rhubarb?
It starts with an M.
Murked?
Yeah, there you go. Right in the pub. Gotti went to prison for his involvement, but was later made because of the Rodney hit. Yeah, and let's not forget, Gotti took out Two Guns? Tommy Two Guns?
Tommy Two Guns, yes.
Joe Pesci's character from Goodfellas.
Goodfellas, yep. I love some of those. That's one of the things I none of this is amusing. I'm not making light of anything, but the nicknames that these guys carry,
yeah,
kill me.
He got that because of the two pearl-handled pistols.
Yep, two pearl-handled 45s, 1911s, if I'm not mistaken.
That I don't.
I believe I saw that in one of the videos. There was two pearl-handled 45s.
I think so, but.
And I believe they were model 19. The 1911 was the model number.
Now, I do have, I'm not sure what time it is.
We are over an hour in.
I still have the 20 fascinating facts about the Italian.
Well, we can go over that relatively quickly. I will say that you said you have something next Wednesday, yes? Yes,
I have the Take Back the Night event.
Yeah, she has a school event.
It's ours is taking place at the school, but it's actually a nationwide event.
Long story short, she will not be available. I will probably be escorting her to and from the event, but I am going to do a pre-recorded show. Completely off topic of what tonight's is. I'm going to compare the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the book, to The Wizard of Oz, the movie, and do some of the notable differences. Let's go into a slightly lighter discussion topic.
This is because I made him watch The Wicked.
Yes,
it Wicked, is. Pardon me, not The Wicked. Wicked.
Yes, she made me watch Wicked, so now I'm going to do a...
I'm going to torture him more when the second part comes out.
Yes, she is. So I'm going to do that. I've already found a number of differences between the book and the movie. I'm a bit of a sucker for authenticity, and there is definitely some discrepancies there. So we're going to cover that. It is completely a much lighter topic than what we were discussing tonight. And that's one of the reasons I'm going to do it. And as I said, it will be a pre-recorded thing that I will just air and schedule to be aired next Wednesday at our normal time. But she's now going to go ahead and cover the 20.
Yes, this is 20 fascinating facts about the mob.
Okay,
and this is
about the mob or about
fascinating facts mafia. Pardon me. Fascinating facts about the birth of the Italian American Mafia. And some of these aren't necessarily so much about the birth of the mafia.
Mm-hmm.
For example, number 20 is the decline of, it actually says decline of the mob, but again, it is the Italian American Mafia. In the 1980s, the Department of Justice and FBI took a wrecking ball to the mob. It was actually a drastic change for decades. The FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover had treated things with kid gloves and denials of the mafia's very existence.
Mm-hmm.
As a result, the Italian American Mafia today is a mere shell of what it was.
Oh, yeah.
From a tight-knit and disciplined nationwide crime behemoth, the mob's activities are now confined mostly to the northeastern U.S. and Chicago. Its ranks are riddled with informers, and its members go in fear of the ever-present threat of imminent indictments and lengthy jail sentences hanging over all mafiosi. Pardon me. In its heyday, however, the mob had been was one of the world's most powerful criminal enterprises. Now, I'm betting that most of, if not all of our audience has the same response that you had when I asked that question earlier. And that was where the mafia started here in the US.
I had said New York. I was incorrect.
Yes. And that's, many assume that the Italian American Mafia has its roots in New York. That's where the 5 families call home. The Godfathers there, is set there, and it's a melting pot extraordinaire.
And your favorite movie is kind of set there.
Yeah.
Goodfellas.
It was also the first destination of millions of Italian immigrants in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. However, the Italian American Mafia, no, it started much further south, down in Dixie. In 1869, the New Orleans Times reported that the city's 2nd district was overrun with, quote, well-known and notorious Sicilian murderers, counterfeiters, and burglars, who in the last month have formed a sort of general co-partnership or stock company for the plunder and disturbance of the city.
Went into it strictly for they went in knowing that's what they were going to do.
You'd almost think that instead of Sicilian, they'd have had French roots.
You would? Yeah. I mean, you really would. But I don't think the French ever really had an organized crime that we found.
This will kind of explain why. The favorite destination of Southern Italian immigrants in the 19th century wasn't America, but Argentina and Brazil. In these latter countries' native culture, Romance languages, Catholic religion, and warmer climes were more hospitable and easier to adapt to than our nation. New Orleans became a secondary destination because of its extensive trade with those southern locales.
Makes sense.
By the 1870s, Sicilian immigrants Carlo and Alberto Matranga had established the Matranga crime family in New Orleans, operating out of a salon and brothel.
A saloon?
It's a salon.
Okay, but I would... A salon and brothel?
Yeah, in 1870s. Okay. It's a salon.
Okay.
Well, they did call things salons that do not mean like hair salons.
Right.
They expanded their activities from prostitution to labor racketeering and a lucrative extortion racket known as this Black Hand.
There we are with the Black Hand again, ladies and gentlemen.
They also collected tribute from Italian laborers, as well as from rival Italian crime family, the Provenzanos, who monopolized South American fruit shipment.
Anything can be sold as long as you can make money on it.
This will explain something as well. And didn't you say that the Irish take on law enforcement? Wasn't there something about that you said?
Yeah, they were known to challenge.
Yeah, and not so much with the Italians.
Right?
This will explain why. In the 1880s, the Matrengas warred with the Provenzanos over control of New Orleans, of the New Orleans waterfront, actually, with each family bringing in more and more mafiosi from Italy.
Mm.
The violence actually spilled over, putting pressure on the authorities. New Orleans police chief launched an investigation into mafiosi activities, only to be assassinated for his troubles in 1890.
You want to look into us here? Let me show you how that ends.
Hmm?
It was like, you want to look into us here? Let me show you how that ends.
Unable to identify his killers, he stated, quote, "The Dagos shot me,"
The Dagos.
before he breathed his last.
Mm.
The assassination created a backlash. The 19 New Orleans mafiosi were arrested and prosecuted. In a first trial of 9, the defendants successfully tampered with the jury. Despite ample evidence, 6 were acquitted and 3 had hung juries. As seen below, the public reaction was drastic. The following day, March 14th, 1891, a mob of thousands, including prominent New Orleans citizens, broke into the prison housing the defendants. They lynched 11. I think they were, 16?
I believe so. 16 total involved. And they lynched 11 of them?
6 were acquitted, 3 were hung jury, so that's 9. It was a trial of 9. But yet, 11 were lynched, so I'm not sure who the other 2 were.
I don't know.
They had a salutary effect. That had a salutary effect on the Italian American mafia. Unlike Sicily and even southern Italy, where criminals could brazenly defy the authorities in society with little to fear from either. Yeah, it was different here, with limits with what criminals could get away with. From then on, the mob adopted strict rules against targeting law enforcement, to the point where there were even preemptive killings of colleagues seeking to go after cops or prosecutors.
Cops are off limits.
As are, like it said, prosecutors, so you can't even go after DAs.
Mm-mm.
I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was agreeing with you.
In the early 20th century, Italian criminal gangs had formed in the Northeast, most notably in New York City, as America became increasingly attracted to Italian immigrants. They were small-scale operations, little different from other New York City gangs, generally operated in Italian neighborhoods and preying upon Italian immigrants. That changed in 1920 after passing the 18th Amendment and the introduction of prohibition, banning the manufacture, transport, and sale of alcohol. Making alcohol illegal did not reduce the high demand for the alcohol, and it simply created an environment for widespread tolerance of crime in order to provide the thirsty public with the booze it created. Essentially, Prohibition just took a major American industry, hitherto operating legally and created a gift to organized crime.
Mm.
It turned out to be a godsend to the mafia. Potential profits from the sale and distribution of alcohol were astronomical. That, coupled with widespread tolerance, like I was saying, by much of the public, as well as many cops and politicians who did not see the sale or consumption as particularly immoral, it made bootlegging, irresistible to criminal entrepreneurs across the nation. Prohibition thus gave a boost to organized crime in general, and to the Italian American Mafia in particular, as Italian gangsters were already well positioned to take advantage of this. Italian hoodlums, thanks to the mafia in the old country, could draw upon a tradition of sophisticated, organized, hierarchical, and disciplined criminal organization. They had a model, as well as experienced personnel who could readily duplicate the system.
Cookie cutter.
Now, this is the scary thing. Mussolini actually did do something right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just as Prohibition produced a business boom for organized crime in the U.S., and the Italian American Mafia in particular, Benito Mussolini and his fascists came to power in Italy. No Italian government before had managed to keep Sicilian Mafia and the Camorra in check, nor did any Italian government since. Mussolini crushed them. Farcical buffoon that he might have been, that was one thing that the Italian dictator actually did and did right. The Sicilian Mafia and Camorra throve and still do in Italy's corrupt political culture. They worked the system and mastered its intricacies, subverted politicians, police, and judges with bribes and threats, and bent them to their will until organized crime became a state within a state. But the fascists did not share power or tolerate challenges, and Mussolini was neither concerned with nor constrained by legalities in dealing with the Sicilian mob and Camorra.
Gotcha. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am starting to hurt a little. How many more do you have? Because I've
done 8. I've got 12 more. What we can do is I can give you the link, and you can post this.
Yep, I can post that to the bottom of in the description. You'll shoot me that. I can post the link for anybody who's interested in seeing what all 20 of the differences were. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, I will shoot it to you via text or email.
Either one, and I will do it after we generate the clips and things before it posts.
Okay.
So there is some of the differences between the Italians and the Irish, which was suggested by a couple of listeners last week. And like I said, next week we're going to do the differences between The Wizard of Oz, the book, and The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. I believe I may have that reversed, but between the book and the movie. And for that, you can thank Mrs. Mutt for making me watch Wicked and finding out that the name that they gave the girl in the movie for the Wicked Witch is not correct according to the book. And I did not realize that Glinda had a sister And she also had a secondary name, which is not mentioned.
Wait a minute. Glinda had a sister.
Yes, the witch of the south, the good witch of the south, was her sister.
Oh, okay.
At least according to what I read earlier. So there will be some things in there. I've always kind of been fascinated with the movie. So I'm going to give Mrs. Mutt the final word tonight. I want you all to take care of yourselves and each other, and we will see you, well, at least in spirit, next Wednesday with the pre-recorded show.
Have fun storming the castle.
All right, gang, everybody be good.